Good evening! Welcome to Tweed Up, where we take video games, music, movies, and more way too seriously. I'm Neil, this is Zac, and today we're gonna review
a book!
Stephen King's Fairy Tale.
Woo!
Are
you a Stephen King fan?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a Stephen King fan.
I'm a Stephen King fan.
This is Stephen King's first fantasy novel since The Wind Through the Keyhole, which is probably the last book that I actually cried.
Oh, wow, really?
Reading.
Interesting.
Yes. Huh. This is a Dark Tower story. Full disclosure, Dark Tower is, in my opinion, the best thing that Stephen King has ever created.
Yes.
That's where my
Wizard and Glass is my favorite
of him
Stephen King book.
Really lies.
Yeah.
Yes, Wizard and Glass is his best creation.
Now, does that apply to the interconnected novels? Because that gets pretty big.
No, it does not.
Okay.
But I have liked some of his more recent stuff. I really liked Revival.
Haven't read it.
It's really good. And I loved 11/22/63.
Really good.
Fantastic novel. So if you've only read
if you're only into the scary stuff,
older horror stuff, I feel like he's still doing horror books, but and Revival is somewhat a horror book.
Yeah.
But
there's some horror elements in Fairy Tale.
Yeah. But Fairy Tale is his kind of return to fantasy. And
welcome back.
Yeah, I mean, Eyes of the Dragon is also a favorite, you know.
Which also features Flag.
Yeah, from Dark Tower.
But
so Fairy Tale was released September 6, 2022.
I didn't realize it had been out so long.
Yeah, and King has sort of described it was his pandemic book, you know, and a lot of the...
He didn't, what a lazy jerk, he didn't write 11 like Brandon Sanderson.
But the idea of an empty city, you know, gave rise to some of so, you know, just to give a basic background...
Gonna talk about Charlie Reed?
Charlie Reed, a 17-year-old, 17 during the main portion of the story.
He's the narrator, and it's told in the past tense. He's telling a story. 17 when the story starts. He gives some background.
Yeah, his mother died when he was pretty little, and
that goddamn bridge
drove his father to become an alcoholic.
Yep.
But I mean, I really liked when that portion. Actually, I really like the whole. So about half of this book is built.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. So this is almost two different books in a lot of ways, and I liked both of them very much. I loved one part more than the other.
Yes.
Yeah. First half?
Yeah. 100%. So, and even Charlie's dad, dealing with alcoholism and...
As an alcoholic, really well. I mean, Stephen King has
and you're so proud of him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You love Charlie's dad.
Yeah, turns it around and, man, heartwarming and encouraging, and Charlie's motivations through this, which we really want to avoid spoilers in this, even for a book that's 2.5 years old. But Charlie's motivation that really triggers most of the events in this book has very much to do with his father's recovery from alcoholism.
Yeah.
And it's really magical. And Neil hasn't cried since Revival. I cried in Fairy Tale.
It was...
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Wind Through the Keyhole.
Don't say that Neil cried during Revival,
man. That ain't true.
Yeah.
But, so, I want to try to not spoil anything that's not, spoiled on the dust jacket. But
which is
there's a lot of info on the dust jacket, which, I don't know, that's kind of how they do it these days. But,
movie trailers. Charlie's 17. He's attending high school. He's a pretty standard dude.
Plays sports.
Really good athlete. Big dude, which comes into play. The fact that he's athletic is very useful. He one day is walking down a street and hears a dog making a sound. He investigates and finds his neighbor, Mr. Bowditch, had fallen from a ladder and injured himself.
Yeah.
And that's how he becomes acquainted with this old recluse who lives in this scary old house, the stereotypical scary house
Yeah.
in the Stephen King neighborhood.
And Charlie, calls the ambulance and calls 911 or whatever. But that relationship between Charlie and Bowditch is very much, I feel like, Stephen King's done this before with like Jake and Roland, you know, and
it's one,
a story.
I thought we weren't talking about that, but okay.
A story like Apt Pupil, Yeah. So I mean, I think Stephen King is very good at writing.
Older man,
yeah,
younger man, some kind of mammal.
But
you got a great mix.
But they're both Stephen King.
Yes. And then all the characters are Stephen King.
It's old Stephen King talking to young Stephen King.
We don't have Oi.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Yes,
we don't
have Oi, we have Radar.
Radar, the German Shepherd who is...
She's awesome.
Mr. Bowditch's world, and as a dog owner, I know how that is.
Yeah.
I had a lot of apprehension going into this book about that dog, and I'm not going to talk about it, but...
so the dog is older.
Very.
And,
Charlie has to take care of him because Mr. Bowditch is going to the hospital.
Yeah.
And Mr. Bowditch very much does not want Charlie in his house. He is a recluse, but he loves his dog so much that he decides to trust Charlie and tasks him with taking care of Radar, trusts him with that. And
so that's the setup, and that's about
Charlie falls in love with the dog.
And there's more to it than that, and there is a shed in the backyard at Mr. Bowditch's house.
That's a magical shed.
Sounds coming out of it from time to time. Spooky sounds.
Scary sounds.
Needless to say, something is in there.
Yes.
I mean, the dust jacket gives away, I guess we can say, there is a portal. This is a portal fantasy, right?
Spoiler alert, it's on the cover.
It's on the cover, yes. But I don't want to give away too much about what is through the portal. But
I don't, but I would like to talk about my feelings about what's through the portal.
Okay. Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, so before Charlie enters the world, he gets a little bit of a heads up from Mr. Bowditch and makes he's got some motivations to go down there. One of which is selfless and one of which is selfish. And in his encounter, he gets down in this other world, or through to this other world, and he starts encountering people who have this malady that makes them gray. And I don't want to talk about too much about that, but they all have some kind of disability, hearing, sight, inability to speak. And I really liked that as a kind of mystifying obstacle, while still demonstrating how, and there's a line that really stuck with me. Here is something I learned in Impus. Good people shine brighter in dark times. So characters like Dora, I was just smitten with Dora.
Yeah.
All right, even though they're okay,
we're getting a little bit closer, spoilery here. I would say broadly, I really like the world that he has created, the fantasy world, and it is a dark fantasy world, and King. So this book is.
If you've read some of us, like The Dark Tower, this will rhyme in a way.
But I mean, and Stephen King, I think, wrote this novel as a tribute to a lot of his favorite books.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can tell he's kind of having fun.
He spells that out. I mean, Ray Bradbury's, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
He specifically cites the book.
H.P. Lovecraft. Fairy tales. Gog Magog, which is from Welsh mythology, So there are a lot of influences that he throws into this fantasy world, and I think that it works pretty well.
I do too.
I think what Zach was starting to allude to maybe is there are some really interesting characters that Stephen King introduces. I like this book a lot, but there is
just gonna tear apart now.
There is a large section where all of these characters are gone. For a pretty big section of the book, and they come back at the end, and I think the ending is great.
Ending is great.
It really leans into the cosmic horror, like the Lovecraft stuff, which I feel
big time. Yeah.
Stephen King doesn't do too often.
I hadn't really
Yeah, but there's a decision, and it is a character. It changes. It is done in service of the main character's
are you talking about
growth in some ways? The section that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
But I almost wish the book was longer because
Yeah.
you spend a
Some of
little
the
bit
characters
too
that
much
he-
time with these new characters and not as much time with some of the characters that you just met.
Yeah.
It's like a 600-page book, which
And
seems long, but this was a 100% page turner for me.
Oh, yeah.
I flew through this novel.
I burned through it too, yeah. I thought it was great. We can't talk about the way that it ties into other things, but I think that people familiar with King's work will find little Easter eggs and other very obvious tie-ins.
I think one of the really cool things, and what I was talking about developing characters, is that Charlie Reed is not always a likable character.
Yeah, so
you know, he kind of
has a darkness in him.
He becomes. I mean, it's not that he becomes. It's always there.
Well, he goes through like an evolution.
He leans more into,
and he makes a kind of conscious decision.
The negative part of his personality.
Yeah.
Which is kind of disappointing, but that makes.
You thought it was disappointing? I did not. Really?
I don't want that Charlie. I want good Charlie because he does such a good job of not being.
I'm not going to talk about specific things, but throughout the book, Charlie talks about how he and his friend Bertie Bird got into trouble and did bad things when his father was going through the worst of his alcoholism. And he feels shame about that time in his life, and he doesn't want to be that person anymore. But through the course of the events of the story, he has to do what...
He doesn't have to.
Well,
he chooses to
He does.
You know.
And it makes him more effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of not leaning into the darkness is that, yes, sometimes it is.
You think
it is an easier choice to be, selfish and violent,
Mm-hmm.
But
and I think
the whole point of not doing that is that it is hard to not be selfish and violent. It is a difficult choice to not be selfish and violent, So I did not like it when he strayed from that,
Boy, we're going to have a spoiler-filled conversation after we film this. I really thought that,
But I think it's good writing. We wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't good writing. If we didn't believe in Charlie Reed as a character,
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
To me, so the part of what I like about him leaning into the darker side, the colder side of himself, not just that it makes him more effective and able to do some of the things that he needs to do, is he's overcoming shame of his past terrible...
But he shouldn't be ashamed of those
okay, so you want to talk about shame? I want to talk about shame.
Okay.
What purpose, evolutionary purpose, does shame...
It makes you better able to interact in society?
So you think that it's specifically to make us better at being a community? I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, but I just don't know of what other evolutionary traits make you a better member of society.
I mean, shame,
happiness, feelings. Which ones make you a better member of a community?
But shame
depression?
Shame is very important.
It is. I agree.
If I
didn't have shame, I would do terrible things.
Exactly.
Right.
We need shame.
Agreed.
Shame serves a very important purpose in our lives.
It does. But I think it can also be crippling. There's a line in this book that says, "You may say, I have no reason to feel shame, that I did what I had to do to save my life and the shed secret. But shame is like laughter and inspiration. It doesn't knock." So to me, I have things that I wish I hadn't done when I was younger, and throughout my life. And that really resonated with me because you're laying in bed at 3 a.m. Oh, hey, brain. Hey, do you remember when you prank called that guy? Or blew up a mailbox when you were 14 years old? And I don't know that I need to hold on to that.
I'm not saying you need to hold on to it, but you should allow your shame to shape your future actions.
That's true. I mean? I would definitely agree that avoiding things that would cause shame is the path to be on.
Yeah. I'm not saying you need to hold on to shame about past actions. That's not what I mean.
So just don't be Catholic. That's the moral of this review. But no, good talking to you about shame.
Yeah.
Are you ashamed to have watched our video? If not, please give us a like. Maybe subscribe if you are so inclined.
It's a really good book.
It is a really good book. Read it.
Page turner. If you haven't read Stephen King for a while, I think it's a good one to like, you know.
And if you've never read Stephen King, I think this could be a decent first one.
Sure,
and if you like this, then go straight to The Gunslinger.
Yeah.
So that you can read Wizard and Glass, the best Stephen King book of all time.
Indeed. All right. Thanks for watching Tweed Up.
Woo.
Peace out.
Peace.
Captain Depression, we salute you. 'Cause I'm only a private, but you know my heart is in it. Yeah, I swear my heart is in it. I never